What happens behind the closed palace doors when the clock strikes midnight and the cameras are finally turned off? You aren't just witnessing a routine royal update today. You are watching the moment the British monarchy's carefully constructed wall of silence finally reached its breaking point. For months, a single haunting question has echoed across the globe. Where is Kate? Tonight, Prince William has finally chosen to drop the mask, revealing a truth so secret and so unprecedented that it has shaken the very foundation of the crown. He has confirmed that while the world assumed Princess Catherine was merely resting in total seclusion, she has actually been performing a shadow return to duty, reclaiming the emotional center of the monarchy from the deepest corridors of Windsor Castle. This was not a move of transparency by choice. This was a confession dragged out of the institution because the silence was no longer a shield. It had become a weapon being used against them. According to deep-level internal sources, the secret protocols were invoked not because of a sudden miracle cure, but because the royal machine realized that public trust was evaporating faster than they could manage. William stood in a private briefing room at Kensington Palace, his voice steady but heavy, with a truth that had been hidden since the midnight hour of Kate's first diagnosis. He revealed that Catherine has been working in silence, conducting high-level briefings from her sofa, reviewing state papers behind closed curtains, and guiding the future of the monarchy, while the world theorized about her absence. This secret return to duty was never about mystery for the sake of drama. It was about the ultimate form of royal control. It was about who gets to own the narrative of the future queen's survival. But why did William wait until this specific window to reveal the shadow duty? The answer lies in a leaked internal memo that whispered of unexpected complications, which forced a total reset of the royal calendar. As William looks toward his own inevitable future as king, he has realized that the crown cannot survive if it continues to pretend that its human core never breaks. He understands that for Kate to remain the jewel of the monarchy, she must be allowed to be human before she is an icon. This is the first chapter of a silent revolution where the Princess of Wales has rewritten the royal script, proving that in an age of digital cynicism, her only true currency is a brand of honesty that the gray-suited advisors tried desperately to suppress. The truth is now out. Kate never truly left. She was simply the only one brave enough to hold the line in the shadows, while the institution around her struggled to find its voice. Behind the heavy oak doors of Kensington Palace, a war was being waged, not with weapons, but with words, memos, and a suffocating silence. While the public was being fed, polished, vague lines about planned surgeries and the right to privacy, a deep and dangerous fracture was forming between Prince William and the long-standing palace machine known as the Firm. Sources close to the inner circle reveal that as Princess Catherine's condition took its most devastating turn, the first instinct of the senior advisors was to double down on the mystery. To them, Catherine was a constitutional asset, a piece on a chessboard that had to remain flawless in the public eye. Their priority was the optics of an unshakable institution, but William, watching his wife fight the most personal battle of her life, had finally reached a point where he could no longer play the game. The tension escalated to an unprecedented level when a series of internal hospital memos were reportedly leaked to the upper echelons of the court. These were not just medical charts, they were urgent warnings that the strategy of silence was backfiring. Whispers began to circulate within the hallways of Windsor that Catherine's recovery was far more fragile, and the path far more complicated than anyone dared to admit to the press. The air was thick with panic management. Every time William canceled a high-profile engagement at the 11th hour, the palace spin worked overtime to call it a personal matter. But in the high-stakes world of the monarchy, you don't lose sight of a future queen for months by accident. This was no longer just a health crisis, it had transformed into a systemic crisis of trust. Inside these closed-door sessions, William reportedly clashed directly with traditionalists who feared that admitting any form of vulnerability would permanently weaken the monarchy's image. The argument was razor-sharp. Protect the ancient mystery of the crown at all costs, or tell the shared human truth about the woman suffering at its center. It was during one of these late-night, high-tension confrontations that a reported email subject line sent ripples through the staff. She deserves more than silence. This internal pushback was the first real sign that the old, rigid rules of the palace no longer applied to a modern world. William realized that privacy was being used as a shield, not to protect Kate, but to hide an uncomfortable reality that the advisors didn't know how to handle. He saw Kate being reduced to a clinical update, an invisible figurehead, while he wanted her to be seen as a mother and a wife first. The shadow return we are seeing now is the direct result of William's defiance against a system that wanted to keep her hidden until she was perfect again. Today's revelation isn't just about a recovery. It's the explosive fallout of a palace war that nearly tore the monarchy apart before it ever reached your screen. The night the palace finally blinked wasn't marked by a grand ceremony, but by a single, shattering decision made by a king who had seen enough. King Charles, a man whose entire existence has been defined by strict protocol and the preservation of the crown's mystery, finally reached his breaking point. Sources inside the palace describe a moment that will go down in constitutional history. The king, visibly shaken and emotional after a private visit to Princess Catherine's bedside, realized that the palace machine was no longer protecting the monarchy, it was destroying it. What did he see at that bedside that terrified him more than any bad headline? He saw the woman who holds the emotional center of the institution, the woman who humanizes the crown, failing under the weight of a system that demanded her silence even as she suffered. The faked photos, the cancelled schedules, and the vague updates were no longer working. They had created a crisis of trust that threatened the very foundation of the Windsor line. Charles realized that while his advisors were busy managing perception, they were losing touch with reality. The gray-suited men in the back rooms were still arguing about the impact on the long-term institutional strategy, but the king saw the immediate human cost. In a heated meeting with his senior staff, Charles reportedly slammed his hand on the desk and gave the order that echoed through the halls of Windsor: no more hiding. This wasn't just a command for transparency, it was an act of defiance against the very institution he leads. He decided that his daughter-in-law's humanity was more important than the cold, polished optics of the firm. This was the moment the monarchy was forced to admit it was mortal. By overrunning his entire court to tell the truth, Charles proved that the crown must adapt to human vulnerability if it wants to survive the 21st century. This wasn't an accidental slip. It was a truth dragged out at the last possible moment, because a king chose his family over the machine. The gray-suited courtiers stood in stunned silence as the traditional never complain, never explain rule was shredded in front of their eyes. The king understood that in the modern world, secrecy is often mistaken for guilt or weakness. By choosing to prioritize Kate's well-being over palace protocol, he signaled a permanent shift in how the monarchy operates. The mask had finally slipped, and for the first time in months, the air in the palace began to clear. But the price of this honesty was only just beginning to be felt. The machine had been broken, and now the world was waiting for the one person who could truly explain the cost of that silence. 94 seconds. That was all it took to dismantle centuries of royal stoicism and replace it with a raw, undeniable humanity. When the world finally saw Princess Catherine sitting alone on that simple wooden bench, framed by nothing but daffodils and the cold spring air of Windsor, the palace machine didn't just stop, it evaporated. This wasn't a pre-recorded royal address delivered from a gold-leafed drawing room or a sterile podium. This was a future queen, stripped of her tiara and her titles, speaking as a mother, a wife, and a patient. But do not be fooled by the apparent simplicity of the scene. While the setting was humble, the psychological impact was a masterstroke of high-level emotional strategy. By choosing that specific bench, Kate wasn't just giving a health update, she was inviting the world into the inner sanctum of her private pain. The visual of her sitting solitary, her voice occasionally trembling as she spoke the word cancer, was the ultimate hook. It bypassed every skeptical journalist, every cynical commentator, and every wild conspiracy theorist, heading straight for the emotional death zone of the public's heart. This was the first time in modern history that the British monarchy used its vulnerability as its greatest strength. Inside the palace, this video was viewed as the monarchy's final weapon against a tide of misinformation. Prince William reportedly insisted that there be no professional studio lighting, no heavy makeup, and absolutely no royal insignia in the frame. He knew that for Kate to survive the intense scrutiny of her shadow duty, she had to stop being an icon for a moment and start being a human being. The truth that is only now coming to light is that Kate wrote every single word of that script herself, refusing to let the gray-suited palace advisors polish away her fear or her resolve. The strategy was clear: silence the noise by showing the wound. For 94 seconds, the world stopped looking for clues in edited photos and started feeling the weight of her reality. This video didn't just explain her absence. It reset the entire narrative of the British monarchy for the digital age. It proved that the only thing more powerful than a crown is a shared human struggle. But as the tidal wave of global empathy flooded in, so did a new kind of pressure for the future king. William now had to face the consequence of this absolute revelation. How do you lead a nation when you have just shown them that the heart of your monarchy can bleed? The secret was out, the silence was over, and the crown had changed forever. While the world was united in a tidal wave of empathy for Princess Catherine, a much darker storm was brewing behind the gilded tapestries of Buckingham Palace. For months, Queen Camilla had been the face of a monarchy in crisis, the steady hand appearing at every engagement, while the king and the princess were forced into the shadows. She believed she had earned her place at the very center of the decision-making process. But as the shadow return of Kate and the radical honesty of Prince William took hold, Camilla reportedly found herself facing a terrifying reality. She was being systematically sidelined. The new monarchy being forged by William and Kate didn't just include a change in communication. It included a total restructuring of the inner circle. And for the first time in 2 decades, Camilla found the doors were being closed before she could reach the handle. Deep-level palace insiders claimed that the tension reached a boiling point during a high-stakes briefing at Balmoral. While the king, Prince William, and Princess Anne were locked in discussions about the Highgrove Accord, Camilla was allegedly told to remain in her private quarters. The explanation given was cold and institutional. This is a matter for the king and the crown. For a woman who had fought through decades of public backlash to stand beside Charles, this was more than a protocol snub. It was a personal betrayal. She reportedly realized that William was no longer just a son waiting for his turn. He was a sovereign in waiting, who was actively reclaiming the power she had briefly held in the king's absence. The fracture wasn't just about schedule. It was about the soul of the monarchy. Camilla's frustration stems from a single haunting realization. The radical honesty strategy being championed by William and Kate is the polar opposite of the survivalist secrecy that Camilla has spent her life perfecting. To her, showing the wound is a sign of weakness that could invite the end of the monarchy itself. Sources claim she was heard echoing a line that has now become a whisper of legend within the palace walls. "I was promised a crown, not a curtain call." This 48-hour storm of internal fury saw key staff members forced to choose sides between the traditionalists loyal to the Queen Consort and the modernists rallying behind the Prince of Wales. As William tightened his grip on the royal communications team and Kate reset the public narrative, Camilla's influence began to dissolve like mist in the morning sun. The Queen Consort had survived the scandals of the past, but she was now facing a much more dangerous opponent, a new era that simply no longer had a seat for her at the table of truth. While the halls of Windsor adjusted to the new era of transparency, a seismic shockwave was felt across the Atlantic, reaching the gates of Montecito. For years, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had built their brand on the idea of being the only ones brave enough to speak their truth against a cold, secretive institution. They positioned themselves as the victims of a palace machine that chose silence over honesty. But when Prince William authorized the 94-second video and revealed the shadow duty of Princess Catherine, he didn't just share a health update. He effectively dismantled the Sussex's entire raison d'etre. By being more vulnerable, more honest, and more raw than Harry and Meghan ever dared to be, William and Kate regained the moral high ground, leaving the Duke and Duchess of Sussex in a state of stunned isolation. Deep-level sources claim that the 94-second video was a PR nuclear strike that no one in the Sussex camp saw coming. It made Harry's grievances in Spare and their various Netflix docuseries look trivial and self-serving by comparison. How do you complain about palace protocols or seating arrangements when the future king and queen are fighting a life-and-death battle with cancer in total dignity? William's strategy was as cold as it was brilliant. He used the absolute truth as a defensive wall. By revealing the wound, he made the Sussexes' attacks look like harassment of a recovering family. According to insiders, William has now issued a silent but firm decree. There will be no more olive branches, no more private negotiations, and no more responses to the noise from California. The shadow return of Kate has proven that the monarchy doesn't need the Sussexes to be modern or relatable. It only needs the truth. This shift represents the final closing of the door. Harry, who reportedly reached out privately after the video aired, was met with a wall of formal, institutional silence. William has realized that the crown's survival depends on a unified, focused front, and Harry is no longer part of that equation. The shadow court at Kensington Palace has moved on, focusing entirely on the stabilization of the Windsor line and the protection of Catherine's legacy. The leverage that Harry once held the threat of more bombshell revelations has evaporated. When the monarchy shows its own scars, no one cares about the complaints of those who walked away. William's masterstroke was simple. He stopped fighting Harry's drama and started leading with Kate's reality. The war for the soul of the monarchy is over, and for the first time in years, the Sussexes are finding that their voices are echoing in an empty room. The crown has moved on, and it has done so with a strength that only the truth can provide. While the global audience was transfixed by the emotional resonance of Catherine's 94-second revelation, a much more clinical and calculated operation was unfolding within the reinforced walls of Kensington Palace. This is the rise of what insiders are calling the Shadow Court, a collection of seasoned strategists, legal architects, and iron-willed royals who have quietly redirected the torch of power. Prince William is no longer just a prince-in-waiting. He has become the de facto ruler of a monarchy in transition. While the king remains the ceremonial head, the actual gears of the British state are now turning under William's direct command. This isn't just a temporary delegation of duties. It is a silent revolution that has effectively moved the center of gravity from Buckingham Palace to Kensington. Deep-level sources reveal that under the code name Operation Sovereign Shift, William has assembled an inner circle that operates with a level of precision and secrecy that has left the traditional gray-suited courtiers of the old guard in a state of shock. Foreign leaders, high-ranking military officials, and key political figures are no longer being routed through the king's office. They are being summoned to private briefings with William. The Highgrove Accord we discussed wasn't just a piece of paper. It was the legal foundation for William to begin exercising sovereign authority without the need for a public coronation. This shadow court has focused on one thing: survival through modernization. They have stripped away the bloated, expensive ceremonies of the past and replaced them with a lean, highly efficient command structure that answers only to the Prince of Wales. The tension between the two palaces is palpable. While the traditionalists at Buckingham Palace cling to ancient protocols, the shadow court at Kensington is already rewriting the laws of royal engagement. William has realized that for the monarchy to survive the 21st century, it must operate like a modern executive branch, not a medieval relic. He is making decisions on state investments, diplomatic realignments, and constitutional reforms that would have taken years to approve under the old system. The truth William revealed isn't just about Kate's health. It is about his own readiness to lead. He has proven that he can manage a global crisis, protect his family, and run a shadow government all at the same time. As King Charles fades further into the background, the world is waking up to a reality they weren't supposed to know yet. The reign of King William has already begun, and it is being ruled from the shadows with a cold, unwavering hand. While the world was fixated on her physical recovery, a much more profound transformation was taking place within the mind of the woman who will one day be queen. Princess Catherine has moved beyond the realm of fashion icon and beloved public figure. She has emerged as the Shadow Queen, the silent architect behind the most significant structural changes the British monarchy has seen in a century. If Prince William is the visible hand of the Shadow Court, Catherine is its strategic brain. The truth that Prince William revealed today is that every major decision made during the last 6 months, from the freezing out of the Sussexes to the implementation of the Highgrove Accord, bears the unmistakable fingerprint of Catherine's cold, calculated resolve. She has realized that for her children to inherit a stable throne, the institution must be purged of sentiment and rebuilt with ironclad efficiency. Deep-level insiders describe a new Catherine, one who is no longer content to simply follow the advice of the gray-suited courtiers. During her months away from the public eye, she reportedly mastered the intricate details of constitutional law and media psychology. She was the one who insisted on the no more hiding policy, understanding that in the age of digital transparency, the crown's survival depends on controlled vulnerability rather than absolute secrecy. She is the silk glove that masks the iron fist of William's authority. It was Catherine who drafted the key points of the 94-second video, realizing that her own pain could be used as a shield to protect the monarchy's future. She has transitioned from a supporting player to a de facto sovereign, participating in midnight briefings and strategic planning sessions that define the very soul of the new Windsor reign. This evolution has sent shockwaves through the traditional palace establishment. The advisors who once viewed her as a figure to be managed now find themselves answering to her. Her influence over William is total, not because of emotion, but because of a shared strategic vision. Catherine has proven that a modern queen doesn't need to be seen to be powerful. She has learned the ultimate lesson of the crown. The true authority is often exercised in the silence between the headlines. As the Shadow Court tightens its grip on the British state, Catherine remains the calm, unyielding center of the storm. She isn't just recovering for her family. She is recalibrating the monarchy for a century of survival. The world is looking for a princess to return to a balcony. But what they are actually getting is a queen who has already claimed her throne in the shadows. Deep within the classified archives of the Duchy of Lancaster lies a document that will never be read by the public, but its contents are already reshaping the world you see today. This is King Charles's political testament, a high-stakes blueprint for the survival of the British monarchy that bypasses centuries of tradition in a single, desperate stroke of the pen. The truth that Prince William revealed today is only the visible edge of this document's execution. Charles, a man who spent 70 years waiting to lead, has realized that the greatest act of kingship he can perform is not to hold on to power, but to surrender it to the only two people capable of saving the crown from obsolescence, William and Catherine. He has seen the failure of the old, rigid stoicism of the past, and in this secret decree, he has officially placed the soul of the monarchy in the hands of the Shadow Court at Kensington Palace. The political testament explains the why behind the sudden shift we have witnessed. Charles reportedly watched the global reaction to Kate's 94-second revelation and came to a profound and perhaps painful conclusion. He realized that the public no longer pledges loyalty to an untouchable institution. They pledge it to human beings they believe in. By betting everything on William's cold authority and Catherine's strategic vulnerability, Charles is effectively ending the era of the Grey Men who have run the palace for generations. He has authorized the Highgrove Accord, not as a temporary measure, but as a permanent transition of influence. The secret is out. The king has chosen to become a bridge rather than a destination. He has sacrificed the traditions of his mother's reign to ensure that his son's reign survives the digital age's demand for absolute transparency. This document is the real reason Queen Camilla has been sidelined, and why the Sussexes have been permanently muted. Charles has drafted a constitutional firewall that protects William and Kate's new radical honesty strategy from the interference of those who still cling to the old ways. He understands that the monarchy is currently a house of glass, and in William and Kate, he has found the only architects who know how to reinforce it. The truth William shared isn't just a medical update. It is the public face of the king's final gamble. Charles is stepping back into the shadows of history so that the Shadow Queen and the strategic king can take center stage. The reign of Charles may have been shorter than many expected, but through this political will, he is ensuring that the Windsor line remains unbroken, proving that sometimes the ultimate power of a king lies in knowing exactly when to let go. The dust has finally settled on the greatest crisis the British monarchy has faced in the modern age, and from the wreckage of secrecy, a new kingdom has emerged. What Prince William revealed today is not just the end of a health saga, it is the official launch of a new constitutional era. The era of never complain, never explain is officially dead, buried under the weight of a world that demands to see the human heart beneath the ermine robes. William and Catherine have proven that the crown's greatest strength is no longer its mystery, but its ability to be vulnerable. By choosing to bleed in public, they have rendered themselves untouchable. They have traded the cold, distant authority of the past for a new, unbreakable bond with the people one forged in the shared reality of struggle, fear, and survival. The vision for King William's reign is now crystal clear. Truth is the ultimate weapon. In this new Windsor era, transparency is not a sign of weakness, but a shield against those who seek to destabilize the institution. The Shadow Court has successfully recalibrated the monarchy to survive the digital age, proving that a future king and queen can be both sovereigns and humans at the same time. But as the new reign takes hold, a final, chilling warning has been sent to the world. To the traditionalists who tried to silence Catherine, to the rivals who sought to exploit her absence, and to the voices in California who built a brand on royal drama, the message is undeniable. The crown is no longer a passive observer of its own story. William and Catherine have reclaimed the narrative, and they have done so with a level of strategic brilliance that has left their challengers in the shadows of history. As we look toward the future, the legacy of these months of silence and the subsequent explosion of truth will be remembered as the moment the monarchy saved itself. Catherine, the Shadow Queen, has rewritten the job description of a royal consort, proving that grace is most powerful when it is tempered with ironclad resolve. William, the strategic king, has shown that he is ready to lead with a hand that is both compassionate and uncompromising. The secret is out, the truth has been told, and the Windsor line is stronger than it has ever been. The monarchy hasn't just survived, it has been reborn. And to those who still believe they can break this family or this institution, let the 94 seconds of truth be your final warning. The new kingdom is here, and it is built on a foundation that no scandal, no illness, and no betrayal can ever touch. The future of England is in hands far stronger and far more honest than we ever imagined.